Hey YouTube, it's the Busy Diva giving another Fatal Attractions review. I love the show Fatal Attraction, not Retraction, is one of my favorite crime dramas because not only does it have some interesting stories, but quite um, a few cautionary tales of things that could go wrong in relationships. I'm going to review episode series. It's season 13, episode 22, Twice the Terror. This is based on an incident that happened in 2016 in Lake Beach, Florida. The subject at hand is a young woman named Shania Copeland, and she was only 20 years old when she came to her unfortunate demise at the hands of her ex ex lover. Anyway, so Shania Copeland, a little background on her. She was a young woman. She grew up in a big family, mom and dad. I really hate to have to stress that point because things can happen in a person brought up in a single family household as well as a two-family household. She was brought up in a two-family household, but her father did pass away when she was in her late teens, early 20s. Let's see, late teens, I'll say, from cancer. Within a month of his diagnosis, he was gone. So I can just imagine her devastation. You know, she was daddy's girl. He loved her so much. She loved her father. She loved her family. She had a great support system of relatives. And, she had a pretty good life. She was trying to find her way as a young person. But then when her dad died, things just was really, really hard on her. And a little later on in life, she met a guy. She had a little baby at 20. She had her first child. That relationship did not work out. The dad didn't stick around, but she loved her child so much. She had a great support system in her family, an extended family. And in spite of that, of course, she wanted someone in her life. Growing up with a dad, she saw the importance of having a father in her child's life, and that's what she wanted so much. That's what they was told, that she wanted a father in her child's life. She'd meet guys, but she just didn't, they didn't seem like to be the right persons who's going to be there for her and the child. She cut that off. But she finally met somebody named George McCrae. Now, the thing about this one was different, and he told her, I guess he ran her a good game of how he would take care of her, showed her in a sense of how he could love her and love her child and be there for her, support them. But Mr. McCrae was 42 years older. Yes, he was 62. She was 20. That's a bit of a flag because he was not only old enough to be her father, he's old enough to be her grandfather. And but she seemed to love him. They seemed to be getting along really good and the relationship was going on until her life was cut short when her mother comes to the house and finds her in her bed with 3 gunshot wounds. And as a mother myself of a young woman, I can't imagine the devastation, finding your child gone like that. So her mother was in hysterics, ran outside the house. But as she came out the house to, try to get help in processing and all the crazy that goes on with finding out loved one is gone, like in such a way, they also find neighborhood friend Leotis Lester on the ground, dead, apparently dead from a gunshot wound. And but she found her daughter, but then they did get her to the hospital. They said she was breathing, but she died in the hospital. And Mr. Leotis was also dead. So now got to sort out what happened, who did what. And one of the first persons pointed at, of course, was one of her ex-boyfriends who was supposedly pretty jealous. And, she had left him initially because he supposedly was cheating on her. But then he was one that didn't want to let her go. And they said he would be harassing her. So, of course, those that knew him and knew that situation thought, okay, hey, it might be him. So the police took him in, questioned him, asked, did the questioning of him, and he supposedly had an alibi, and they really couldn't find any, evidence that he did that. But he did point at them, Mr. McCrae, George McCrae, the present boyfriend. He told how, he seemed real jealous, and how he had actually threatened him. So then they thought, okay, well, let's take a look at Mr. McCrae. As the investigators were taking a look at Mr. McCrae, they found out he had a really extensive criminal history. He had lots of, from domestic violence to threatening people. He had a really long rap sheet. For of course, he's been living long enough to have a long one, but he had a long rap sheet. And that brings me to another part of this cautionary tale. This incident happened in 2016. Now, I'm thinking back about when I first started dating after my divorce back in 2013. My divorce, I was divorced in 2012. Everything was finalized late 2012. So it wasn't like about 2013. I was like, wow, I got back out there. But the one thing that I thought that I should always do, especially in this age of technology, and because I had a friend who met her husband online, and she was would tell me how she dated people that she would meet and how she would get background checks. And this was way before 2013. This was in the mid 2000s. And at the time, she had a friend in law enforcement who, whenever she meets someone, she would get background checks. And that stuck in the back of my mind, you know. And so when I got back into the dating scene back then, I said, well, shoot, that'd be a good idea. I met a couple of people online that would talk to. I met people in person, which is to me the best way. But even if you meet someone in person, you don't always know them. You got to really, do some due diligence, even on people that you meet in person. As this young woman met him in person, but apparently she did not do a background check, or if she did, she ignored it. But there was nothing said about her having done one. But for me, every person I met, I did a background check. I have the files to this day. And my husband, who recently passed away, we got married in 2019, but we were dating. I told him, yeah, I did background on you. He thought it was kind of funny, and I showed it to him. We talked about it, and even though when we first met, he told me, things about his past up front. That's rare that a man will be honest as he was. But I had done my due diligence, and you just have to today. You just don't know people. You think you know people, and you just don't. But I made it a practice. Every person, if I met them in person or if I met them online, I did the background checks. And so even, background check may not tell you every little element of that person, but it's going to at least let you know, possibly if they're married, they have a criminal history, and just because someone has something in their past, criminal past, doesn't automatically make them the worst person in the world, but it can give you some insight and give you a chance to make a decision if you want to deal with that in your life or not. And so that came up to me, that was a little flag to me, that in 2016, you know, that she apparently didn't even do a background check, because it would have easily come up, even at a very basic level, that he had such a violent history. I know there's so many companies out there that'll do background checks. A lot of them will say, hey, we'll do for free. Then you turn around and have to pay for it. But I mean, I did, I had a subscription to a company, that I was paying for. So that when I need a background check, I could get it, and sometimes I would do the free ones. But then, when we talk about having to pay for things, what is the cost? You can't pay for your life. I mean, how much is your life worth that you can't spring for a few dollars, even if it's 30, 40, 50 bucks, $100, for your safety, your peace of mind, quite possibly your own life? And I felt my life was worth it to spend money to get these background checks. And I'm glad that I did, you know? So that right there in itself kind of gave me some pause when I was, hearing this story after they gave the information of George's extended criminal history. If maybe she would have done one, maybe she could have, you know, thought about, thought twice about it. But then, the way he seemed to be so smooth, it could have convinced her, you know, but I don't know. As extensive as it was, I don't know how much convincing he could have done, but some people are pretty slick. So, back to this story at hand, it was found that he had a very extensive background, criminal history. And so, the police thought they would try to get him in to question him, but they were having a difficult time finding him because when this stuff started, breaking loose, he took off. And one of their big flags that they really should look at him because he didn't show back up to work, after this all happened. He wasn't showing up for work. He was nowhere to be found. But you know what? Another thing in modern technology helps us. Another piece of that are surveillance cameras. Now, this was 2016. A lot of businesses and some living areas did have surveillance. Maybe not as pervasive as today. We all have cameras. We have the doorbell cameras, house cameras around our homes. It's very, very much more common. But thanks to surveillance footage, um, they were able to see him leaving the area when Shania was shot. They were able to see him get in a particular vehicle, and they were able to track that vehicle down. But it was not his vehicle. But another thing that also happened too when Shania was killed, her mother's car was stolen that day. But it wasn't her car he was in. They saw him in another car. They tracked that car down to a person who um, actually was in prison with George when he was locked up at one point. And so they questioned this person to see if maybe, he helped George or what part did he play. But the guy just seemed to have been an innocent bystander, so to say, as he said that George just asked him for a ride. He knew him from prison and he gave him a ride and told him to drop him off. He just gave him the ride, dropped him off where he asked, and left. He said he knew nothing about any murder or anybody that George might have hurt or killed. He was just giving him a ride, which sometimes another little piece of cautionary tale that we have to people on a ride that we might have just ran across or know. Um, it, you never know what they might be up to. I remember one time I worked in this retail store some many, many years ago, and I gave a young woman a ride home, and she had bags of merchandise from the store, and we buy stuff at the store because we at this store we worked at we get discounts, and we have our discounts, and then sometimes they had coupons. And so, it's pretty cool to catch the sales and discounts because you work in there, you get to see, what is going on sale, see more of what is out there. And this young woman, she had just started. I had spoken with her a few times. She was a young woman, had, I think, two or three little children. She was, struggling to raise her children. She was working hard. It's what I knew of her. And so usually when I meet people at that particular job, sometimes we would exchange numbers so that if we wanted to switch a shift, because we were allowed to do that, if we couldn't come in, oh hey, so and so said she would work that shift. So she was on my list of persons to switch a shift with, and so we had exchanged numbers. So that was as far as our relationship went. When they day though, she needed a ride home, and and I was like, sure, where she lived wasn't far from where I lived, wasn't out of my, too much out of the way. And I forgot to drop her home. And I thought, no harm, no foul. I dropped her home one day. And so Monday, I came up there to the store, and I wanted to catch up with her because I was in the area. So I knew she was going to be working. So I thought, all right, let me come in, and I was going to ask her to switch a shift with me. And I went to where she was supposed to be working, and he said she wasn't there anymore. I'm like, oh, she's not working anymore. What happened? They caught her stealing. And I was like, my heart sunk, and I was like, oh my God. Because she had a couple of big, good sized bags of merchandise. She had showed me it was clothes for her. She had said she had got for her children. It was mostly kids stuff in the bag. She was showing me a couple of little outfits that she got. Oh, they were cute, and stuff. And but she didn't, say much of anything. But this girl that I had given a ride, she had been stealing merchandise and they caught her. And that's one thing people don't realize, when they're working in these stores, first persons they're watching are the employees. And so they're watching you before they're watching other shoplifters because employees have the inside track, so to say. And a lot of times they're just, it's just likely they're going to be stealing from their employer. I mean, it's happened a few times. I've seen people come and go, and some people just really believing they could just get away with it until they let them steal so much, and then they catch them, and then the charge is much higher because of the dollar amount that you steal. The higher the dollar amount, the bigger the charge. And these stores, don't care, and they want to get you for stealing for them. They're going to just let you go ahead on think you're getting away with it until they're ready to catch you. And so apparently, since she'd been there, she must have been stealing. And I kind of wouldn't doubt, that what she had in those bags might have been stolen, because I did kind of get to thinking for a second, like, she's struggling, and these items did not have sales tags on them. They were regular price clothes, you know. I did kind of, as because we were already in the car and going, and she was showing me this stuff. And I did kind of think about that for a moment, but then I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Maybe somebody, she could have been gifted something to buy the kids stuff. I didn't know that, so I just didn't even think about it anymore, But I did see that, you know, there were quite a few regular price tags. And that store was not a store where they sold super cheap stuff. The stuff in that store, meantime, was not cheap at all. So I was like, okay. So I'm like, well, thank you, Lord. I learned my lesson about giving people a ride. And so, just like this man in this story who'd given George a ride, he just, hey, he told me, asked me to drop him off. I just dropped him off. Thankfully, he didn't ask him to get back in the car and ask him to take him somewhere else, or maybe had the girl's body, or had some, because that's how a lot of these people get caught up with these people doing things. They end up helping them to dispose of bodies, helping them dispose of merchandise and do this and do that. And they get caught up. But fortunately for this man, they didn't have anything to hold him on, because all he did was give George a ride. And that's what the investigators took it, that that's all he had done. He had no involvement in the young woman's murder or Mr. Leotis's murder. But they still were trying to look at who killed him, but at the time it wasn't connected. So, and then it was not connected until another friend came in. I believe this was the friend was Tamika Foster. It was one of Shania's other friends that had come in and told about George, reported to the police how George came up one day and was threatening. It was she, to the friend, Shania, and Mr. Leotis. Mr. Leotis, the other guy who got shot. Leotis Lester, he was a friend of the family. He was one of the neighborhood guys who was a friend. Everyone knew him. Everybody talked to him. He was a little older guy as well, but he was not, according to the story, trying to date or go with Shania, or any of the young women there. He was just like one of those family friends, those persons around the way you talk to. He imparts a little wisdom with them. They just hanging out, listen to music, just around the way. And so one day they all were hanging out, just sitting on the step, talking, listening to music. And George happens to pass by and see him in the presence of those women, young women, and he gets really angry. So this is what the friend Tamika Foster reports to the police, how George got really, really angry about them, talking. He was acting really jealous, accusing Shania of cheating with Mr. Leotis, and just, making threats and saying what he's gonna do something. And, first they didn't want to think nothing of him, but Shania was, pretty done with him because he becomes so controlling and smothering her, not wanting her to go nowhere, afraid she would cheat, which is an insecurity sometimes of people, especially in relationships like that. Because these older men, they know these younger women. They're young, they're pretty, they're put together, and he know they could get somebody younger their age. He know in his heart, why does this young woman want me? And they get insecure, but that insecurity just went way south with him, and he just really wanted control of this young girl. So the Shania, she was one that didn't want to put up with mess, and so she was pretty much at the end of her rope with that relationship, and she was wanting to end it. And that's what, um, everyone, from what they say, that she wanted that relationship to an end because of how George was treating her. And so the police had not caught George. They were still looking for him. He then took off and went on the run. And he went, let's see, he had gone to a hospital. They wound up catching him because he was robbing someone at a hospital. He's some people coming out of the hospital. He's going to rob somebody at a hospital. That's just really low. But they think he was trying to just, get some quick money so to help facilitate his escape. So that's when he actually got caught robbing some people at a hospital. So they got him in, took him in, thought they could get him to confess. He he was too slick to try to confess. He was too callous to even care, about this girl and what happened. He didn't want to talk anymore, and they were, trying. So he finally shut him down, did I want my lawyer business, and so they couldn't question him anymore. They were worried that this case might go cold because if they had no true evidence on him actually killing her, they didn't have a weapon, they didn't have, you know, that's what they did not have, a weapon or anything, to compare anything to him having shot her or what have you. They just saw him leaving. So that wouldn't have quite been enough from what, they say, because anybody could be leaving that area. So there wasn't enough at the time. They needed more to get him. But, as they say from the Bible, there's God always has a ram in the bush, which came into in the name of a neighbor named Alex Martinez, who was someone who had actually seen him come out that house, who had seen him from a distance not too far away um, shoot Mr. Leotis as well. And he was afraid. He said that George had threatened him, that if he said anything, that he would come after him. And he was initially afraid to come forward because George had threatened him. He said, I believe um, he was like living with his mother. He didn't want, his family to be threatened. And he was genuinely afraid. Because, I mean, if you just saw somebody kill somebody, and they didn't kill you, and then they tell you, you better keep your mouth shut, what are you going to do? You know, he was afraid. But he did finally, either his conscience was getting the best of him or what have you, but he did and come forward to the police, and they were able to put two and two together and get George off the streets. So he was found guilty, and the rest is history. So, the cautionary tale, there's so many lessons to this unfortunate scene. One of the first things I'll say, do a background check on people. It's not, nothing is a guarantee. We have to have some sense of discernment. We have to do our due diligence on people. I'm recently widowed. My husband was um, tragically gone now, almost a year, and now then I will be back out there again. I never thought I was going to be back out there. I didn't, I thought we were going to be forever, which it was his forever, until death do us part. I didn't think it was going to happen like this. And I'm not looking forward to being out there again. But I tell you what, I will, be even more cautious these days, because these are the last days. People are just hurting people for no good reason at a faster pace, it seems like. This happened in 2016. Crazy things are happening now in 2023. So we've got to do our due diligence in these relationships, do our background checks. Young women, I know a lot of the young men are immature. We have these manosphere men, but there are good men out there. There are decent men out there. We do have to stay prayerful and watchful. And God will bring us, the right person. And you don't have to get someone old enough to be your grandfather. I'm not saying that he couldn't have really loved her, but let's be real. The man was old enough to be her grandpa. What did he want with this young girl? But a lot of times these older men have an influence, just like that's why my adults are not permitted in this country to be messing with kids, because you have an undue influence. And even if that kid's a teenager, 20 years old isn't too far out of the realm of a teenager. I mean, that's 1 year out of teen. And so you're still new to a lot of things of the world and life. A person 40 years older than you has so much life, maturity, bodies, and everything over you, and so many things that they can have more of an influence over you than, say, someone closer to your age, where you can learn each other together and grow together and you know maneuver life together, at your own level. So I'm not saying that you should not date someone significantly older, but keep in mind and watch out for flags. Watch out for the flags of insecurity and jealousy. I mean, jealous that you want to hurt somebody just because they're talking to someone. You want to hurt that person because they're looking at you and they're talking to you. They get an anger, in them just because, someone else looks at you. I was in a situation where the person got angry at me because someone was looking at me that I didn't even see them looking at me. It was someone that I knew. They claimed the person was looking at me and got mad at me. I'm like, what control did I have over that person looking at me and I even know they were looking at me? That's just how some people's minds can be when they become insecure. And so when these little things start happening, in these relationships, especially, make sure, now that's the one thing you should see a person angry. See how they act when they're angry. I mean, people are going to get angry, but it's how you react when you get angry. So just let's keep our eyes wide open and do our due diligence and stay prayerful. My condolences to Shania Copeland's family. It's been 4 years, but I mean, 20, oh Lord, 16, that's 7 years, but still. I'm sure not a day goes by her mother doesn't think about her. You know, that was her baby, that was her child, and she was so young, when she was taken away. So my heart still goes out to her and her family and all of those that love her. My condolences. Let us learn from this. Peace.